Good morning everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're back with another weekly recap. In the weekly recap, I like to go over anything old school RuneScape related. We're going to look at the new content update this week, as well as community news related to old school RuneScape. This was a pretty light week for content, however we have a ton of topics to discuss today, including a potential new Grandmaster quest in the Fremennik region. From what I can tell, it seems like that will be the final major content release of the year. If not, maybe it'll be going into 2020. On top of that, there are quite a few stories this week I would like to discuss related to old school RuneScape, including Zulrah Bots, the Runtelite Plus client, and as always, a review of the weekly Q&A. Anyway guys, hope you enjoy, and let's get started. Now, the content update for this week is called the Kill-Death Ratios and Web Slashing Update. So this week we are seeing the release of the separate kill-to-death ratios for the PvP Worlds and Bounty Hunter. The PvP Worlds and Bounty Hunters now have their own kill-to-death ratios distinct from the Wilderness kills. On top of that, the notice board to the north of the Edgeville Bank will now show your kill-to-death ratios and those of nearby players. There has been an update to how the web slashing mechanic works. Previously, only knives and a certain type of sword could actually cut through these webs. However, now any weapon that has a slash bonus will actually be able to do that, with the success rate depending on the weapon's slash bonus. So for higher tier weapons, you'll be able to slash through webs much quicker. One thing to keep in mind is no weapons have actually had their slash chance reduced. So overall, it's just going to be a buff to web slashing. At worst, it's going to stay the same. Next up here, there was a small change to the OSRS dungeon in Privdinis. The Bloodvelds and the Neckrails within OSRS dungeon have been replaced with their mutated and greater versions. And one really necessary change here is to how the crystal item charges work. All of the crystal items, including the tools, armor, and weapons, have had their maximum number of charges increased to 20,000, and the Blade of Saldor has had the number of charges it receives per crystal increased to 100. Previously 25, yeah, so that weapon was almost unusable, as the amount of time it would take to recharge it is extremely high, and even if you were a funded main account, you still couldn't do it, because you have to complete the content yourself, because the crystal shards are not tradable. So a very necessary change, giving 4 times more shards now, and may actually make the weapon viable in other places. Man, I almost bought one of these overnight. I wonder what the price is at now. Now, last week there was a line of sight beta where players got the chance to try out the game with the new line of sight engine. Now this week the beta is going to continue, however with a modified version of the line of sight algorithm. Now when a player is not interacting with another player, the existing line of sight algorithm will be used. However, in all other circumstances, it'll use the new algorithm. A little bit confusing and tacked on, but if it works, I guess. And of course, as always, there are a ton of smaller changes, bug fixes, quality of life changes, and that is it for content updates this week. So there is no Runelite update this week, so we're just going to jump right into the community news, and there are a few stories I want to look at more in depth at the beginning here. Okay, so first up here we have Runelite Plus. Now I think I've mentioned this before on a update video, but there's been a few new plugins developed over the last couple of months that have kind of surfaced on Reddit, and I wanted to have a quick look at them. Now first up here we have kind of like a Dance Dance Revolution prayer flicking assistance. I'm not really sure if there's a better way to describe that, but essentially the game detects which prayer you need to use next, and then will put a kind of floating box coming down towards your prayers, which represents the attack coming towards you and when you need to actually prayer by. This makes it incredibly easy to prayer flick in more tense situations. The example here is at the Inferno. However, this plugin would pretty much be useful in all circumstances. Now, another one that got popular this week is a plugin for Raids 2. It shows the exact floor map that players need to run, which really does simplify this part of the raid. Now, a lot of people will argue that third-party clients as a whole are cheat clients and you shouldn't be able to use them. However, I think the main distinction is Runelite is working with Jagex to keep things within their general parameters of what they think is okay. And then we have things like Runelite Plus, which are truly pushing the boundaries of what a third-party client can do, and not really in a good way. I kind of fear that if enough of these third-party clients pop up producing these somewhat cheaty or overpowered plugins, we could get third-party clients as a whole removed, which isn't something I'd like to see. Personally, I've gotten pretty attached to Runelite. It definitely improves my player experience. So anyway, what do you guys think about Runelite Plus or other clients like it? Let me know what you think down below. Now, another thing that I've seen discussed quite a bit this month is Zulrah Bots. and, well, just suggestions and ways to reduce the amount of bots there. There have been quest requirement suggestions like locking it behind the Song of the Elves quest or just higher level diaries or something like that, as well as changing the rotations every month to make it more dynamic and harder to bot. However, there was actually a really insightful comment by a Jagex moderator, Weeth, saying that 90% of the accounts here aren't actually bots, they're gold farmers that have either purchased the account, hijacked it, or trained it legitimately. He said that we are banning tens of thousands of bots every day. Yesterday they banned 50,000 bots alone, and thousands more for manual gold farming on top of that. He said for the Zulrah bots specifically that reporting them isn't really going to do too much, as they are aware of the gold farming accounts, but unfortunately they can't ban an account for looking like it will probably sell gold at some point, and really it is better to not destroy an innocent account over banning more potential bots every day. However, a lot of these accounts will store up a ton of wealth and trade it off all at once or more discreetly, and at that point the crime has been committed, but it's too late to really prevent it. I think eventually there could be a solution to botting where most of them get wiped out through some game change or something like that, but I really don't foresee gold farmers getting eliminated, as by the time they commit the crime it's kind of too late. So next up here, let's talk a little bit about the Fremennik Grandmaster quest. It was initially teased in a tweet on August 18th. It says, "Your pet rock ignores you. You are an exile of the Fremennik province." However, in the weekly Q&A, they do discuss it a little bit more. Next Tuesday, there's going to be a blog post about the Fremennik Exiles quest. It's a master tier quest and might take an hour. They are going to pull things like new creatures as well as a new Slayer dungeon. We will have more information on it next week. I'm really excited to see how the Fremennik Exiles quest pans out. I really do enjoy the new quest. I am kind of happy that this Grandmaster quest is only going to take an hour. A little tired of doing like 4-hour quests on release. Next up here, for the line of sight changes, there are two videos that really do a good job of highlighting how the change works. One by Reddit user named Relics and another one by Wooks himself. So I'm going to leave the link to those two videos in the description if you're a little bit confused of the line of sight change. There's actually a Twitch user who is going to be breaking the 30-day Twitch record, and he's going to do that by playing old school RuneScape. The record is going to be 563 hours in a month, which is almost 19 hours a day. Very impressive, although I'm not sure if we should be striving to beat these records. Next up here, the rank 14 overall hardcore Ironman has died with a total of 506 million experience, and they died at the Elf Quest boss fight. And the last up here, I was scrolling through Reddit, and of course I see a little meme on myself. Last week's update was called Small Game Updates and Betas, and of course I named my video Major Content Changes Are Coming. Oh god, I really hope this guy doesn't actually look at some of my other videos, because I've definitely clickbaited way worse than that in the past. That being said, I was kind of more referring to the Bounty Hunter rework and the PvP changes. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for community news this week. And the last up here, I want to do a quick recap of the weekly Q&A. So even the Q&A this week was kind of short. There was a long ass song in it that took up a fair bit of the runtime, but there are still some interesting questions. First up here, have you guys thought about a Barrows Brothers pet? We get why people would ask about it. We want to be careful about driving players into certain content. Pushing a lot of high-level players into Barrows to pet hunt could impact runes/Barrows prices. I didn't really think of that as a consideration. Maybe that would affect it? Can you change it so that you can't see other people's Barrows Brothers? They said they kind of like it how it is right now, being able to see other fights. Maybe a solution could be to remove the attack option from the opponent that isn't yours. It's possible, but it would need a good reason to change it. What about Divine Barbarian Potions? They said they would likely still be useless and a bit of a waste of crystal shards, and not really keen on the idea. What do you think about the 75% pass rate in the polls, given that some players can vote on their alt accounts? In the past, we have polled changing the threshold to 70%. This poll failed, not even reaching 70% itself. There is not a huge drive to change the threshold currently. We have looked into the votes and how many alts are being used, and they don't generally impact the end result. Could the Wilderness Cores spawn Laron's key pieces like Marks of Grace? They would like to buff the Wilderness Cores in some way, but they don't know if this would be the way to do it. It would obviously need a fair bit of balancing. A straw poll had 58% voted yes and 42% no. Could there be another use for the Hydra tail? Maybe add it to the Dragon Mace to make a Hydra's Flail, a crush equivalent of the Tentacle Whip with 10,000 charges. We looked at the tale and offered a bone whip near release, however that didn't pass. They say they may shelve this idea for later for future content. Can you release the Wild Gothic Sleep quest and other 2008 content? They say they really do love Wild Gothic Sleeps, it's iconic, however to add it they would need to add a whole series leading up to it. There's a lot of cool content there, however they'd prefer to work on new content. Would you ever consider adding a loaning system like in RS3? They said they like the system in RS3 but don't like what it does to the economy and incentivizes players not to go for the highest cost thing, and you create a loan for a higher economy. Anyway guys, that's going to be it for today's recap video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to leave it a like. I always appreciate it, and I will see you next week.